So you can see that it contains a bunch of different references here, including a button template, which is actually a prefab I've created. So in the prefab folder here, basically just drag this prefab into there. So whenever it needs to create a saved game button for basically a save that already exists, it's using that template and the script that's contained within it, which is incredibly simple. So in the original version for the save screen script, I actually had another toggle button over here, which would toggle whether delete is checked or not. So when delete is checked, clicking on these buttons has an alternate meaning, which is you delete the save file. So that's probably something you do want, a little button here to toggle it off. So I can just manually check this in the inspector though. So let's just go ahead and delete the save. One click, gets deleted. And then the populate grid method is called again. Also, there's a couple boxes here for sounds that would play whenever something happens. Action complete, so when you save, or delete when you have delete checked and you delete one of these. The reason they're not playing is it's currently commented out. Might update that, might not, but basically it would just play these sounds as an audio source. It contains a reference to the grid layout, which is over here. The grid layout basically contains all of these buttons as they get repopulated and manages how they're displayed. A reference to the Git file name window. That's the second panel we were seeing earlier. So when you hit new save, that's the one that pops up. And then a new save button. That would be over here in the new panel, which is the button confirm save. And then file menu is built off of menu screen. So let's actually go down to menu screen first. It has a couple basic methods. Exit menu and toggle menu are here so that whenever you're clicking on a button script, it gives you extra ways of being able to toggle the menu on and off or just exit the menu altogether. Whenever a menu screen is disabled, it cleans up all the menu items, basically getting rid of them because they're no longer necessary and they shouldn't just keep persisting there. And whenever a menu screen is opened, all existing menu screens are told to close. It basically uses find objects of type menu screen and tells them to close. That's it for menu screen, so let's go back over to file menu. So all file menus, including the load screen, are going to contain a button template for this SaveLoad button. Going to have the ability to delete files that are already saved, so basically that's why the Boolean delete checked is necessary. Can contain an audio clip for the delete sound if you want to play that, and have a grid layout group for when you need those buttons to display and be managed in an organized fashion. And where all of the data is going to be pulled out of for that grid layout, all of the buttons, is going to be this list of SaveLoad buttons. So whenever you click on an already existing save and it wants to overwrite that file, it's one thing to just save the data to that file. But then you also want the button to be updated. So that's what this old file button text method does. It takes the new game data, it takes the old save button, and it basically updates the text in that button to be accurate to the current data. Now, probably the biggest method in this whole grid system is populate grid. So the idea behind this populate grid method is that it's going to take the data from all of those save files, load them up, create save buttons associated with those save files, and then with those SaveLoad buttons, the list of SaveLoad buttons, it's going to populate the grid with them. So it's going to add those buttons to the grid so that it can visually be displayed. And you can see whenever this method is called, basically whenever it needs to display a new list of buttons, it's first going to depopulate the old grid if it exists. And just if there's no old grid, because it's the first time opening that menu up, then it's going to be a completely new list of SaveLoad buttons. And if we dig into Depopulate Grid, it just destroys all the old save buttons, but the list still is there, but it's now an empty list. So it basically puts us at exactly the same place. And then the remainder of the method is, of course, creating those buttons. So first, in one way or another, you need to get all of the save files, all of the data, and I'm creating a list of that game data to hold that. So we turn this game data list into a list of buttons. So in order to do that, we're instantiating new buttons based on the button template, using the grid layout as a parent. And then, of course, the button is of type SaveLoad button. We set the file name on the button, so that's one of the things that's different about the SaveLoad button, is that it contains a property for the file name. We update the button text, so that's exactly like we saw earlier, old file button text, which can overwrite the old text or just create new ones. And we make it so that this new button has a listener, so that whenever that button is clicked, it activates file button pressed. And finally, we add the button to the list of buttons, and the grid takes over from there. So finally, we add the save button to the list of buttons, but what really matters here is that the button is being added to the grid layout, so the grid layout is already managing that. But here, if we ever need to reference it in code, we can basically store reference to it inside of the file menu. So let's just take a look at file button pressed really quick here. You can see that this is an abstract method, so it does different things depending on whether it's a save screen or a load screen. So obviously, if it's a save screen, it's going to save the game, but if it's a load screen and we click on the button, we want it to load the game, going back to the methods we created in the previous video. So let's finally take a look at the save screen, which is an extension of file menu, just like the load screen is an extension of file menu.